Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
We enter upon the wrapping up phase of the considerations of elements of human resources planning, and we are positioned at a point of discussion where we get into planning processes of skill formation, and that is what we intend to take up now. The priorities for skill formation, and that is where planning begins, would be from individual to organizational capacities, and one has to plan for that. One has to plan from hard to soft capabilities, hard to soft competencies, hard to soft capacities. Maintaining relevance in changing times would be an important desiderator, and from operational to strategic management and continuous learning and change. These 5 elements capture the priorities for skill formation and therefore become the objectives of the planning process. How to ensure that is a matter of technique, methodology and operational parameters. The holistic approach to skill formation requires that you lead your own skill development initiative. This is very important. A stage has come where individual skill development initiatives are so large that it is impossible to expect that this effort for every single employee will be carried out by some wing of the organization, and usually it gets remitted to the human resources department. Human resources department, where learning and development is concerned, is progressively verged towards becoming a resource center to which you go to ask for support and facilitation for your own skill development. Therefore, rooting skill development initiatives in the individual is an important strategic breakthrough in HR planning. One focuses on the needs and priorities of the organization as a whole while leading one's own skill development initiative, and skill development initiative need not be something which is totally unrelated to organizations, but I must hasten to add, again in my limited experience of consulting and dealing with HR issues like strategic issues, like issues of investment and whatever else, I have found that experiences varies from organization to organization. Like for example, I used to do some work for CMC some decades ago. Dr. P.P. Gupta was the managing director, and talking of focusing on the needs or priorities of the organization, he had a very simple rule. You could go up to 1 week's training on any topic of your choice, and nobody would ask you whether the topic on which you wanted to be trained and the area in which you wanted to be trained fitted in with the organizational goals. Take off point for this kind of approach was, if you add to the skills, you become a better professional, and no matter what the skills are, you will be a happier man, and therefore, you will be able to enrich your job. So, CMC as the acronym for that organization had then become was essentially positioned in the software domain, and as a software engineer you could ask for a training on Ikebana or Tatebana for a week, and the organization would happily send you on organization time at organizational cost. Therefore, paying attention to the processes and priorities of organization as a whole is of course a driving force, but it is not something which requires coverage of the entire spectrum. One has to pay attention to the processes of skill formation. Build in monitoring and evaluation from the outset. Then this is always to be done from the outset. Build, monitor, evaluate. View skill formation as more than one off event. Engage stakeholders in the skill formation process. Establish an environment that is conducive to learning and change. The process of skill formation needs attention. There are steps in an ideal sequence of skill formation process. In practice, however, the skill formation efforts can begin at different points in the sequence, skip steps or cycle back and forth between steps. This is very important to realize to flag the resilience of the entire activity. Skill formation efforts can begin at different points in the sequence, skip steps and cycle back and forth between the steps. What are the steps? They are listed here. Monitor the external environment to identify needs and opportunities for organizational change. Review the organization strategies. Identify capacity needs and plans for capacity development. Implement and manage the capacities development process. Monitor and evaluate the capacity development process. Fairly simple planning processes, but sequencing them in an effective manner is the key of taking the matter forward. The planning approaches to skill formation requires a generic skill formation approach. This is the dominant approach in skill formation, and this is the HRP with a reference to skill formation. The fundamental assumption is that a set of characteristics necessary for success across organizational setting can be identified. Now, technically and operationally, it is important to be positioned here. The recognition that fundamental assumption is a sound one. The fundamental assumption being that a set of characteristics necessary for success across organizational settings can be identified. This has a plowback to the recruitment and selection process. Again, to go back to the illustration of CMC which I was citing, there used to be so many pressures for employment in the early stages of that organization, because please remember, it had succeeded IBM after the Indian government forced IBM out of India, and it was then meant to maintain computers set up already at different locations, and therefore, it was Computer Maintenance Corporation, and its leadership then converted Computer Maintenance Corporation into the acronym CMC. And when people would ask the CMD what is CMC, he would say, well, CMC is CMC, it does not stand for anything. The idea was to acquire business and provide business leadership and anything to do with software. And the pressures for recruitment were so large that we found it useful to define an entry examination test based on the fundamental characteristics necessary for success in the organizational setting of CMC, and it was a test which everyone had to pass through and qualify before they could be taken up in the recruitment process. We found it extremely successful and useful in finding the right talent. It also helped the organization identify the core skills which the organization needed. Therefore, the fundamental assumption that a set of characteristics necessary for success across organizational settings is a valid assumption at a core level and can percolate through the organization for planning other activities in HR, including recruitment. For example, the skills required for top management would include leadership skills, general management skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, creativity. Criteria based skill formation. The ultimate criteria for skill formation should be strategic vision of the organization. These ultimate level criteria need to be translated into conceptual level criteria. In the operational working of an organization, very often this has been a stumbling block, that is conversion of the ultimate level criteria into a conceptual level criteria. Planning process has to address this issue. This issue can be addressed very simply by atomizing the ultimate level criteria into action points, and the action points become conceptual level criteria. For example, the ultimate goal of skill through excellent customer service might be achieved through speed, value, luxury, service, or a combination of these or other means. So, what has been done? The ultimate goal of excellent customer service has been broken up into its components of speed, value, etc. Now, this is the conversion process from ultimate level criteria to a conceptual level criteria. Each of these approaches would imply different types of employee competencies that would be needed to achieve the strategic vision. If the strategic vision of the customer service is conceptualized as being achieved through speed, then employee skills such as persuasiveness and manual dexterity might then be identified. For those of you who are able to see the point a little more clearly, you will notice the conversion of the ultimate criteria into measurable, identifiable traits which can also be measured, monitored, developed, augmented. Now, let us follow this sentence again. If the strategic vision of customer service is conceptualized as being achieved through speed, then employee skills such as persuasiveness and manual dexterity would follow from speed. You can't have speed unless you have persuasiveness and manual dexterity. So, this helps to augment and strengthen skill formation specifically, so that action can then follow. Based on these skills, operational level criteria such as number of transactions per hour or the number of customer services calls per day might be put in place and the problem is solved. Performance measurement can be a very simple process, provided the homework is done in atomizing the qualities needed, converting them into skills, both descriptive and action, then assigning measurements to it, and the figure work simplifies the process. But like anything else which is worthwhile, this does not happen overnight. The organization has to inch towards it gradually, slowly, effectively, but surely. These criteria would operationalize and drive speed as the means by which customer service will be achieved in the organization, and the organization then becomes a more performing one. There are job based skill formation situations. Please read this. If one is going in for a job based skill formation, then job based skill formation would require an understanding of the degree of stability there is in the environment, and the degree of stability in the environment would be ploughed back in the kind of description which would be there for the organization. To take the discussion forward, job description, job based skill formation would convert itself into a future based approach. The future based approach will require a strategy of the organization to drive the skills that will be considered core and central to the interests of the organization. This in turn would drive hiring, appraisal, training and development activities. Therefore, the skills link the future strategy of the organization with the human resources, and which is what makes human resources such a central concern in all that follows in an organizational frame. And this provides a rationale and a common basis to the human resources management function. Now, all this requires a visionary approach, and there here the word visionary is used more in a practical sense, because visionary means you are going to organize a person based approach where you give to him a future, but you give to him a future in an organizational future which you have both anticipated, mapped and projected scientifically. Therefore, it is both identifiable and something which provides a framework for human action. Now, the person based approach in an organizational context requires identifying the individual attributes that will offer the organization the greatest potential in its human resources. This approach is suitable for knowledge based organizations that depend upon creativity and innovativeness of employees for organizational effectiveness. For those of you who may not be quite tuned into this approach, all that one is recommending is the person based approach, which consists of identifying individual attributes that will offer the organization the greatest potential of growth, will be most effective in knowledge based organizations, and those knowledge based organizations could draw upon tools of creativity and innovativeness of their employees for crafting out an organizational future with greater effectiveness. Using this approach, companies focus on employees' interests, that is, things that excite them and what they are passionate about. Which would lead to additional innovation and knowledge creation. Now, we move on to looking at issues of HR deployment. All the new recruits are subject to specific days of rigorous classroom training. We are told about the mission, vision, organizational structure, processes and procedures. At the end of the training, they are handed over detailed operational manual and job descriptions. After the training, they are sent to some department, branch and are attached to one of the experienced field staff. The new recruit assists the experienced staff in his or her duties and learns on the job. After this training period, the new recruit is placed in another branch with regular responsibilities of the field staff. So, you see there is a sequence of HR deployment that has to be planned. The rotation has to be planned, the movement has to be planned, and for best results, it is important to integrate it with the competencies of the person who has been recruited. Be that as it may, redeployment requires the same degree of anticipation. Redeployment requires the same degree of care. And above all, at the core of it is a planning process which is both scientific, identifiable, therefore capable of delivery. Here are some HR deployment guidelines which I want you to just browse through, so that you know what are the planning processes which can be accounted for, which need to be accounted for to be effective. If you have read through this, then you should be broadly familiar with the sequence the planning process will follow. And this continues. We are not going to spend too much time on this, because this is really a very extended process, and I want to touch upon very briefly its implications and then move on to some description of the employee welfare. But for those of you who are still likely to want to browse through this, a very quick opportunity. a way of showing to you how detailed planning can be and how important it is to create a sense of comfort in the relationship. Now, if we are to look at the issues of HR technology and deployment, then to build the implementation gap requires a deep deployment approach focused on measurable outcomes, end users, process transformation and effective change management. You have heard this in the narration on the man machine topic. You have heard me elaborate upon the need for building in the perspective of the end user. The same principles apply to HR technology and deployment, because the principles of planning, you heard me say, remain the same. It is the domain which changes. Today, HR is in a position to help business leaders understand the impact of talent management technology. Yes, and talent management is a technology. There is a need of a new approach to HR technology deployments based on measurable business outcomes rather than process automation or cost reduction. Now, this is a very important thought. There is a need for a new approach to human resources technology deployment based on measurable business outcomes rather than process automation or cost reduction, which is the first choice most managers exercise when they want business outcomes. HR technology deployments are poised to become tools of business growth, and indeed there are national level awards which have been now running for nearly a decade, which are devoted to identifying business results out of HR interventions. Yes, you heard me right. There are awards which measure business results out of HR interventions, and it is possible to do so. Today's HR technology can deliver significant value to business, but to realize this value, HR must transform the old school implementation methodology, which unfortunately treated the installation of the method itself as the event. I am sorry, installation of the HR department, HR processes is not the main event. The main event is their application, methodologies of application, their continuous modification as one goes on, and indeed ensuring that the business results are the logical outcome. And for this, a framework of reference, which is, for want of a better word, captioned as HR technology deployment, is the answer. The new age of integrated talent management technology requires a focus on transforming processes through configuration to deliver meaningful talent intelligence to support strategic business decisions. I would like to articulate that again, not necessarily explain it, because I think the concept itself is clear enough if the logic of the narration so far has communicated itself. The new age of integrated talent management technology requires a focus on transforming processes. Please note, requiring a focus on transforming processes through configuration to deliver meaningful talent intelligence, to support strategic business decisions. So, what I am arguing for is development of a new, or perhaps not such a new, super specialization in HR, talent intelligence, and link talent intelligence to strategic business decisions to figure out what works where best. The first imperative in this evolution is to redefine how software implementation success is measured. The aspects of measurement need to be clearly identified, and if one is going to get into talent intelligence support for strategic business decisions, which is what I am arguing for this, a redefinition of software implementation success and therefore, its measurement is required. The technical delivery of talent management technology software is no longer the main event in an implementation. It is the new defining deliverables for implementation. The new defining deliverables for implementation that are the key. And these defining principles of implementation of talent management technology will transform processes, and these transformed processes will throw up configurations that will deliver the holistic results that matter to business. They will throw up the holistic analytics that matter to business. They will throw up the results which everyone aspires for, at times bundles through to arrive, on other occasions feels frustrated that they never arrived. To give you an example, therefore, and to wrap up this part of the discussion, for a service organization, the key outcome of any talent management deployment, and please hear me very carefully, for a service organization, the key outcome of any talent management deployment should be to understand the skills deployed, the skills needed for upcoming assignments, and the skills available on the bench. Once that process is done, it will be easier to manipulate and work through a predictable route to business success. Therefore, there is a need to evolve organizational capabilities for deployment. Successful deployments tap capabilities that lie outside the traditional HR skill. It is important for HR leaders to take inventory of the skills available within their chosen deployment teams, identify gaps, and find by building or buying the necessary talent to bridge those gaps. Several high level skills are critical to team, including marketing, business analytics, process design, and indeed governance. The recognition that planning processes alone can achieve these results should be an important outcome of this presentation, and the planning methodology will have to be made organization specific, and a whole set of dedicated core staff needs to augment its skills in organizational planning to make this come about. HR deployment to support business agility is a must. Regardless of industry, staying agile to adjust to new strategy is a constant challenge of most organizations, because agility means change and change involves people and processes. This sentence needs to be read a second time for better internalization. As talent leaders embark on HR deployments that support continual change in business strategy, they must allow for flexibility in their own strategies. By understanding that every 3 to 6 months measurement of success may change. It is important to realize that every 3 to 6 months measurement of success may change. An integration of points within the enterprise may involve. Today's talent management system, many of which are delivered in the cloud, make it easier to adapt technology to rapidly changing business requirements. I repeat, today's talent management systems, many of which are delivered in the cloud, make it easier to adapt technology to rapidly changing business requirements. Which brings us essentially to the study of employee welfare and the concluding segment of what constitutes the elements of human resources planning. Welfare is a broad concept referring to a state of living of an individual or a group in a desirable relationship with the total environment, ecological, economic and social. I repeat, welfare is a broad concept referring to a state of living or individual of an individual or a group in a desirable relationship with total environment, ecological, economic and social. Labor welfare includes both the social and economic contents of welfare. Labor welfare is a comprehensive term and refers to physical, mental, moral, emotional well-being of an individual. It does not necessarily mean, again I may repeat, as has been pointed out several times in this presentation, a blue collared worker. Moreover, it is a relative concept and relative to time and space. It is a dynamic concept which varies from time to time, from region to region and from country to country. So, there is considerable contextual specificity so far as employees' welfare is concerned. There are categories of labor welfare. Labor welfare refers to all those efforts of employers, trade unions, voluntary organizations and governmental agencies which help employees feel better, perform better. It includes provisions for improvement of health, safety, general well-being and industrial efficiency of workers. So, if you are helping them to feel better and perform better, there is nothing altruistic about it. This is very, very focused and functional. If they feel better and perform better, you are providing for industrial efficiency, and that to happen you must take care of health, safety, general well-being. Welfare work therefore may be divided into 5 categories. Statutory provisions by different legal enactments provided by the central government, very often touching upon safety, working hours, security in all manners. Welfare activities provided by state governments, welfare activities provided by the employers, welfare activities provided by trade unions, and welfare activities provided by voluntary social service agencies. Therefore, the number of players in this is large. It covers the central government, it covers the state government, it covers the employers, it covers the trade unions, and it covers the social service agencies. If you continue with the narration, the more appropriate to divide welfare activities into three categories, because that will make it manageable. It would be statutory, voluntary, and mutual. So, instead of going to the stakeholders, where the numbers keep growing larger, because to the list which I have already showed to you, it is possible to add a whole number of other stakeholders with varying degrees of intensity, but varying capacities of making noise: the human rights organizations, the media, the self-appointed moral guardians, and what have you. It is not possible to elaborate all constituents of this act, but it is possible to develop more self-contained categories, and therefore, I have recommended, and I will take you back to the slide just now. We can call them statutory, voluntary, and mutual. Let us get back to the slide and you will follow it more carefully. You have got, as I have recommended, possible a division of welfare activities into three categories, and I have just mentioned this to you. The welfare activities may further be divided into two categories: intramural and extramural. Within the organizations, that is intramural, and outside the organizations, which is extramural. And if you create a matrix on the y axis of statutory, voluntary, and mutual, and on the x axis of intramural and the extramural, you have got a whole set of welfare activities which are easy to comprehend, even easier to implement, and easiest to monitor. Intramural services are provided within the factories and include medical facilities, compensations, creches, canteens, drinking water, and what have you. Outside the organizations are housing accommodation, vocational training, transport from place to place, leave travel, maternity benefits, and you know that several organizations have added paternity benefits to it also. The benefits of labor welfare require basic objectives of enabling workers to live a richer and more satisfying life. Labor welfare is in the interest of labor, employer, and the society as a whole. It is not a charity, it is a need. The focus is on better physical and mental health, and housing, medical, etc. has been mentioned. The intellectual and cultural conditions of life which protects the workers from social evils like drinking and gambling are not advantages which can be brushed away lightly, leads to an enumeration of benefits to the employers which accrue out of labor welfare act facilities, and what it means to a business. Please read this slide carefully. Nothing much to explain on this slide, but an obvious conclusion emerges. Employees' welfare is a serious activity which helps everyone to gain and take the organization and productivity forward. It has benefits for the society, which requires therefore an approach to labor welfare, which is a different approach to labor welfare, reflecting the evolution of the concept of welfare. Earlier on, the government of the land had to compel the industrial houses to do so. Today, everyone sees the advantage, hopefully. With the passage of time, the concept of welfare has undergone a change and is likely to undergo further changes. But please remember, employees' welfare, labor welfare does not conclude with the termination of the formal employment relationship of the individual with the organization, but does indeed continue beyond formal relationships even in the post-retirement phase, because after you have rendered 35, 40 years of service to an organization, in the post-retirement phase, which means lack of wage earning avenues, your physical needs may need more external support, your financial needs need not be as entirely met out of your savings because of the blessings and the meaning of the word blessing need not be lost of inflation. So, the value of your money has deteriorated, the crumbling of very many social networks, which means the social safety net is no longer available, and so there is the whole specialization of post-employment welfare activities, which many organizations have rightly accepted to be a part of their duty, and supporting ex-employees to lead a life of dignity and indeed worth, contributing to the society in their own way. They being beneficiaries not because it is a charity due to them, but it is an investment which the society makes for its own future, a future which faces everyone, which many people in possession may not recognize, but are bound to get there someday. Therefore, again, like many things in management, this is a futuristic approach, and to study the planning processes with reference to the welfare activities of employees is an important ingredient of HR planning. Thank you so much.